All right, listen up. Secretary Marco Rubio stands at the podium, full serious mode, delivering remarks on the resurgence of political terrorism. He's citing 1970s left-wing bombing sprees, thousands of incidents, and tying it to today's sabotage, arson, and targeted attacks. People are cheering, finally someone saying it. But hold everything. If you're watching this through an Ancap, radical objectivist, or agorist lens, this isn't a victory lap. It's a massive red pill on why the state is the problem, pretending to be the solution. Yeah, terrorism sucks, but trust in the monopoly that creates the breeding ground? Let's rip this apart without the corporate media gloss or partisan cheerleading. First, steelman the obvious. Political terrorism is a real objective evil. History doesn't lie. FBI stats on 2,500 plus bombings in the early 70s, overwhelmingly from the far left extremists pushing collectivist fantasies. Today, infrastructure blackouts, targeted beatings, ideological arson, radical objectivism nails it. This stems from altruism collectivism, the idea that individuals are sacrificial fodder for the greater good, the revolution, or equity. Ayn Rand destroyed this in Alta's Shrug. Force replaces reason. Looters envy producers, and society collapses into tribal violence. These aren't freedom fighters. They're initiators of force, violating the non-aggression principle at its core. Ancap agrees. Private property, voluntary exchange, and self-defense are non-negotiable. Aggressors must face restitution or defensive force. But here's the rant. The U.S. government, via its Secretary of State, framing this peak hypocrisy and conflict of interest. This is the same apparatus running the largest military empire, endless foreign interventions, breeding blowback, domestic surveillance that chills speech, and economic controls that fuel resentment. Preempt the "but we need the state to coordinate" argument. Coordination, states coordinate full power. Selective prosecutions, protected class of radicals, funding NGOs that radicalize while jailing dissenters. Markets do it better. Competing defense firms lose customers and profits if they fail. Insurance companies price real risk accurately, incentivizing communities to reject terrorist ideologies or pay the premium. History shows states fail spectacularly. Post 9/11 expansions didn't prevent ongoing threats, they grew the bureaucracy. Agorist angle. Terrorism thrives in the white market controlled by the state. Counter-economics, gray and black market, starves the funding. Why beg the state to fix what it taxes? Regulations and wars exacerbate. Critics say without government chaos, wrong. Polycentric law and private agencies already exist in the pockets. Arbitration firms, private security outpacing police in many metrics. The state is the chaos enabler. Monopoly breeds inefficiency, corruption, and mission creep. Rubio's speech risks expanding exactly that. More funding, more controls, less liberty. Objectively, rights aren't granted by the government. They're defended by rational individuals. Full disclosure, I'm not some ivory tower philosopher or billionaire activist. I'm the guy who spent years diving into these ideas, arguing online, trying to live them imperfectly while the state extracts its cut. This speech hits because I've seen friends radicalized by economic pressure or ideological echo chambers the system creates. I've felt the frustration of watching tax dollars fund both the counter-terror machine and the policies that grow the problem. Yeah, I've been guilty of doom scrolling these announcements, ranting in my head instead of fully seceding. Hours debating minarchism versus anarchism when I could have been building a side hustle in crypto or mutual aid networks. Easy to criticize the spectacle, harder to consistently withdraw consent in daily life. I've slipped into white market complaints too often because convenience wins short term. But that's the mirror. Objectivist self-responsibility demands better. No one's coming to save us. We build the alternatives. Core principles, no compromises. Radical objectivism gives the ethics. Reason as absolute, individual rights as objective, egoism, rational self-interest as moral. Terrorism and the state monopoly both failed this test by elevating force over persuasion. Ancap operationalizes it. Privatize everything, including defense and justice. Markets and security mean innovation, better tech, accountability, better competition, and reputation. No more blank check bureaucracies. Agorist applies a strategy for transition. Counter economics. Live it now. Evade where rights violating, tax resistance through legal gray areas, encrypted trade, decentralized production, build the agora in the shell of the old system. Preempt utopia, or who stops the bad guy critiques. Real world edges exist. Private military contractors already operate. Scale them voluntarily. Historical agorist wins. Underground economics, collapsing Soviet control, modern crypto bypasses capital controls, and sanctions that fuel terrorism. But coordination against organized threats. Voluntary alliances and contracts handle it. Insurance pools, reputation blacklists, rapid response firms. States claim monopoly yet deliver perpetual war and selective justice. The path isn't voting or petitioning, it's economic succession plus parallel institutions. Produce, trade, defend voluntarily, starve the beast ethically. This isn't fantasy, it's applying consent principles to observe failures. The state is necessary to coordinate large-scale defense against organized terrorism. Rubio and statists argue that terrorism involves coordinated networks, funding, and cross-border threats that require a centralized monopoly on force, intelligence sharing, and military diplomatic power. Private actors lack the scale, resources, and unified command to handle sophisticated ideological campaigns, e.g. 1970s wave or modern sabotage. Without government, response would be fragmented, allowing terrorists to exploit gaps. Historically, state actions, targeted operations alliances have disrupted plots. However, markets excel at coordination via incentives. Competing private defense agencies, insurance conglomerates, and information markets would share intelligence for profit and reputation. Fragmentation is a feature. Polycentric law allows rapid, tailored responses without bureaucratic drag. States fail coordination routinely. Intelligence silos, pre-9/11 blowback for interventions. Agorism counters root causes by starving funded through counter-economics, evading taxes that finance foreign policy. Objectivism's a rights-protecting agency needs no monopoly. Competition prevents abuse. Example, private security already outperforms public policy in many metrics. Scale via voluntary contracts. Political terrorism represents a unique ideological threat requiring government surveillance and regulation. Ideologies glorify violence, left-wing collectivism in the speech, spread via propaganda, radicalization, and safe havens. Only the state can monitor, regulate platforms, restrict movement, or designate groups without descending into private vigilantism or bias. Civil liberties must be balanced against existential threats. Rubio's ministerial approach builds international consensus for effective action. However, surveillance states violate individual rights en masse. Objectivist and core rights are objective, non-balanced anyway. The state selectively enforces, protecting allied radicals while targeting others. Predictable monopoly failure. Agorists build reputation economies and voluntary associations that ostracize threats via boycott and exclusion more efficiently than top-down rules. Ancap, private platforms, and insurers price risky ideologies, higher premiums for communities tolerating extremism, incentivizing cultural self-policing. Preempt overreach. History shows state anti-terror laws expand to political opponents. True solution is open discourse plus right to bear arms, private defense, not ceding monitoring power. Without strong government action, terrorism would escalate unchecked. Historical precedent. The 1970s bombing surge and recent incidents prove lax responses invite more violence. Rubio highlights data to justify renewed vigilance and allegiances and resources. Anarchic alternatives lack empirical track record against organized threats. States, despite flaws, have reduced certain terror waves through decisive action. However, states created or amplified many waves via interventionism, welfare dependency, and selective tolerance. Steelman conceals data, but causation lies in statism. Agorism, profitable civil disobedience and parallel economies reduce state capacity to breed resentment. Ancap, historical analogs, Old West private order, medieval Iceland, maintain security without monopoly. Objectivism demands consistent principle. Initiated forces wrong regardless of scale. Respond defensively via markets. Modern private examples, contractors, cyber defense firms, show capability. Escalation fear ignores how state solutions prolong conflicts for funding. Government diplomacy and ministerial effects are essential for international cooperation against terrorism. Rubio's role as Secretary of State enables treaties, intelligence alliances, and pressure on state sponsors. Terrorism is transnational. Purely private or agorist approaches can't engage rogue regimes or coordinate global sanctions tracking. Dismissing this as state theater ignores practical realities of worlds still dominated by states. However, diplomacy often mass empire building and creates enemies. Blowback critique. Agorists engage in decentralized international trade and private arbitration that bypass states. Ancap, competing defenses firms, form ad hoc alliances based on client needs, more flexible than treaties. Objectivism rejects national interest altruism. Rational foreign policy is individual, trade-based, not government to government. Counter-economics, crypto, smuggling networks historically undermine sanctions and funding flows more effectively than ministerial talks. Private reputation networks already handle cross-border disputes better than crypto diplomacy. Critiquing the state distracts from immediate threats and weaken resolve. Moral equivalency fallacy. Focusing on government flaws during a terrorism resurgence is irresponsible. It adds terrorists by sowing division. Rubio calls for unity. Philosophical purism, Ancap agorism is utopian when lives are at stake. Practical governance improvements, better leadership are the realistic path, not abolition. However, moral clarity requires identifying root enablers. Objectivism rejects any sacrifice of principles for unity. Terrorism and state coercion both stem from anti-reason collectivism. Steelman concedes urgency, but principle consistency is the strength. Agorism builds a resilience now via counter-economy. Gray markets funding private security. Ancap private agencies have skin in the game. Profit for prevention, loss from failure. Unlike politicians, no distraction. Critique accelerates withdrawal of consent, starving the apparatus that perpetuates cycles. Historical lesson, empires fall not from external threats alone, but internal parasitism. Build the agora. Threats diminish and legitimacy evaporates. So what now? Don't just watch, act. Start small with Agorist moves. Shift one transaction to gray crypto markets this week. Join or form private arbitration for disputes. Build mutual defense pacts with like-minded producers. Skill up in self-reliance, 3D printing, secure comms, local trade networks, withdraw sanction from the failing system. For the philosophical inclined, reread Rand on Force, Rothbard on private law, Konkin on counter-economics. Apply ruthlessly. Thank you for listening, and see you in the next video.